Hello everyone, this is Jyotsna. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this tutorial, we will see the topic creating and managing threads using thread class in C Sharp. I have already given some introduction about threads and processing in my previous video. Please go and watch that before watching this video. So here we are seeing how these threads are getting created and managed in C Sharp using thread class. Let's take a quick overview of threads. So threads is the smallest unit of execution within a process, and one process can have multiple threads. So here you can see in this example also different processes are there, and each process can have multiple threads. So threads are allows concurrent execution of tasks, improving performance and responsiveness in application. So one of the example of thread is process which is web browser. So we have one Chrome web browser, chrome.exe process is running. So I want to download multiple files from Chrome browser. So that time I can have multiple threads. Each thread will be downloading a separate file. So that way we can have creation of multiple threads in a process to work on our task in web browser. So this is one of the very simple example of threads. Let's see. So in C Sharp, we have this thread class which comes under the system.threading namespace and which we use to create our threads. So there are two steps which are used for the to create threads. One is creating the object of thread class, or we can say instantiate thread class. So here we create an instance of a thread class passing the delegate to the thread function. So this is first step. Next step is when we create a thread class object, we start the thread. So thread class have one method which is start method to begin the execution of thread. This is simple example given here. So public in our main method, I am creating one thread object and passing this thread function here. And here I am saying the thread is running in my function just to check that my thread is running or not. And this is the start method which is used to start the thread. Let's just go over our Visual Studio and run the same program here. I will create one thread t1 is equal to new thread. So we can use the thread start this delegate also to create our thread, but we can just remove this and just create our thread with the instance of the thread also. So now this is the method I have created for the thread to run when we create the thread, right? So I will just create that method here, public void thread1. Um, this method I'm passing here in this thread, right? So I'm making static, so I don't need to create an object of that. So that's why I'm making this method as static. So what I did, I have created one object of thread class, new thread t1, which is over my thread 1, or we can say that this is a thread 1. I can create multiple threads also. I will just copy and paste and say that this is my thread 2. Now I have created the threads. Now I want to start my threads. I will start both of my threads, right? And I will just so in process when we create a multiple threads, there is a one main thread which is already running in our main function. That's why I'm giving this one statement just to clarify that this is the main thread which is running, and these are the two threads which I have created and started. So these two threads are taking only one method and will go and here and will run the this method. So what I will do, I will create another method just to run our another thread. So thread 1 will go and run this method, thread 2 will go and run this method. So when I will just give one console statement just to keep our output window on, right? So it's just a simple program creating two threads, starting those, right? I will just start our execution. So if you see, main thread is running, main thread done with the running. Now these other threads are in execution. If I keep one of the debug point, we can see the number of threads which are currently running also. I'll just close this one and we'll start again. Now if you see, our debug point is here, main thread is running, thread 2 is started, and I have printed one statement. So if you see here, so this list I have got when we go into our file, then Windows and this threads options. So it's under debug Windows, threads option. So here we can see we have two worker threads, one main thread. So now it is at paused at line number 23, which is in main thread, because I have given debug point here. That's why our execution is also started, but actually thread execution is already in process. We can see once we continue our program, we can see the output here also. Let's continue our program. We can see that the execution is started for threads, right? So thread 2, thread 1, so which thread is getting executed, it is printing their values. This way we can have the multiple threads running concurrently. Once the thread completes its execution, it destroys itself. Even main thread, once the main thread statements all executed, this main thread will get destroyed. So likewise, we can have multiple threads created and run concurrently in our program, right? So another thing is, currently what is happening, when I started thread 1 and thread 2, it is executing here. But what I want to do, I want to execute thread first one and then only thread 2. So there is a one method called join, which I can use. So it will once I started the thread 1 with the join method, it will execute thread 1 on first and then thread 2. Let's try that one now. So now thread 1 is running. So first it will start thread 1. It will complete. Once the thread 1 is completed, it will start thread 2, because thread 2 join is given here. Once that is completed, our main thread will get completed. So if you see the output, now at the end it is going to the main method. So if you sometimes, if you want in our application, we want particular thread to complete first before other thread, we can use this join method with that. Likewise we can do that. Let's get back to our presentation. So this is the example for creating threads with thread class. Next is starting a thread. I have already shown how we use the starting of thread, right? And there is another way we can create a thread using new delegate of thread start for the new thread, which is while creating our thread. So why we do that here? So when we create a thread with new thread start thread function with this statement, here this will create an instance of a thread class. But here the thread start is a delegate in C# defined to point to a method that takes no parameters and return void function. That's when we use this new thread start uh, object, thread start class object. So here the thread function is assumed to be method that matches the signature of thread start, where the void return type with no parameters, right? So new thread start, here the thread start is a delegate instance that points to the thread start method. And start, we already know that it is used to start the thread. So one note is that do not call the delegate function directly. Use start to ensure the thread execution. Next is example of using thread class. So I have already given one example. This is just to print the numbers from 1 to 5 in thread 1 and 6 to 10 in thread 2. If you want to print the numbers using different threads, we can use this code. It will also give the same, like first, if I have started thread 1 first and then thread 2 of second, how the threads will get execute that method. That way it will print the numbers. So in thread, when we create a thread, that particular thread have some states given to it, with some of the states are given here. First is unstarted, when the thread is created but not yet started, that time the thread state is unstarted. Then running, when the thread is executing its task, that time its state is running. When the thread is blocked, then thread is waiting for a resources or lock, that time it is in block state. Stopped, so thread has completed execution or aborted, that time thread state can goes into stopped. Then aborted, so when the thread has been forcefully terminated, that time it will go into the aborted state. Let's take some example. We'll just start the execution here. So if we first see, this is the thread 1. Here is the thread state property, which is unstarted because I have not yet started the state, thread 1, right? And they have other some properties also. Here you can see priority, name, manage thread ID, is thread pool thread, is alive, currently not yet started, so it will be false. Now let's start the thread. I will start the first thread, and then let's see the state. Now thread state is running and is alive is also true, but at the same time thread 2 is not yet started, so its state is unstarted. Likewise, when our thread is completed, if I continue, once it's all the threads are continue, I can again check the thread status. I will just pause it and check this thread status. Cannot evaluate expression because the code of the current method is optimized. Okay, so let's continue it. Running. Now both our threads are completed its execution. Now the thread state is stopped. Likewise, these threads have multiple states, right, based on the execution, or the we can say the thread life cycle. So next is managing the threads. So how we can manage the threads? There are different ways. One is setting the priority of thread. We have the priority property to set the priority for this thread. Another is joining the thread. Use join method to wait for a thread to complete, which we already used with our example. Then thread interruption. So use abort method to interrupt the thread. So with this we can interrupt the thread. So these are the ways to manage the threads. So there are some best practices how we can use threading. One is with synchronization. So use synchronization mechanisms like lock statement or monitor class to ensure thread safe operations, and use exception handling to properly handle the exceptions within the threads to prevent the application crashes. Another is resource management. So release resources, example file handles when thread finishes execution. So these are the some of the best practices we can use while using the multi-threading or threadings in our application. So this is all for today's video. We will give the more in detail about how we can work with the synchronization with threading, how we can use the exception handling in our upcoming videos. Thank you so much for watching the video.